Andrew Carnegie, 10 Habits Taught to Napoleon Hill Before the Legend. The last one is shocking. Before Napoleon Hill became a legend, before Think and Grow Rich sold millions of copies, before his name became synonymous with success philosophy, he was nobody. A young man without money, without status, without direction. Just another ambitious journalist hoping for a big break that might never come. And the only reason you know his name today is because of a meeting that changed everything. A meeting with the richest man in the world at that time. Not a motivational speaker, not a writer, not someone who theorized about wealth, a man who built the largest industrial empire of the century with his own hands. Andrew Carnegie. These 10 habits you're about to hear didn't come from books. They didn't come from seminars or workshops or inspirational talks. They came from the mind that controlled steel, railroads, and fortunes larger than most nations. From a man who started with nothing and died controlling everything. And one of them, the 10th one, almost nobody teaches today. Because it's uncomfortable. Because it challenges everything we've been told about wealth, success, and what it means to build something that lasts. If you want to learn from someone who actually built an empire in the real world, not someone who just talks about building one, subscribe now. This channel doesn't deal in empty motivation or surface-level advice. We deal in what actually works. Let's begin. The year was 1908. Andrew Carnegie sat in a room that smelled like leather-bound books and aged wood, surrounded by the physical infrastructure of power. Steel contracts spread across mahogany tables, railroad maps pinned to walls, documents that represented more accumulated wealth than most people could imagine in 10 lifetimes. The air itself felt heavy with consequence. And across from him sat a young reporter named Napoleon Hill, 25 years old, ambitious but directionless, full of ideas but completely without the structure to execute any of them. Carnegie didn't see Hill as an equal that day. He didn't even see him as a potential partner. He saw him as raw material, unformed potential. A mind that could be shaped if someone took the time to do it. And over the next 20 years, that's exactly what Carnegie did. He shaped that raw material into something the world had never seen before. A man who could translate the brutal, unforgiving language of empire building into something the masses could understand and apply. But here's what most people don't know about that relationship. Hill wasn't a natural. He wasn't born with the discipline Carnegie demanded. He wasn't gifted with the focus or the mental toughness or the strategic thinking that separated Carnegie from every other industrialist of his era. Hill had to be taught, habit by habit, failure by failure, year by year. And the 10 habits Carnegie drilled into him, sometimes gently and sometimes ruthlessly, weren't motivational principles designed to make people feel good. They were operational systems. The mechanical difference between someone who dreams about success and someone who engineers it with precision. And maybe, right now, you're exactly where Hill was in 1908. Full of potential, full of ambition. You've read the books. You've watched the videos. You've consumed all the content about mindset and manifesting and believing in yourself. But something's still missing. You have ideas but no structure. You have energy but no direction. You start things but don't finish them. And deep down, you know that what you're doing isn't working. You know that motivation fades. You know that inspiration doesn't pay bills. And you're looking for something real. Something that actually works when the excitement wears off and you're left alone with the work. Carnegie didn't teach these habits in a classroom. He didn't write them down in a manual or present them in a structured curriculum. He demonstrated them day after day, decision after decision, in the way he spoke, the way he thought, the way he moved through the world. And Hill had to watch, absorb, observe, and eventually embody them. What you're about to hear are the 10 foundational habits that separated Carnegie from everyone else in his era. The habits Hill spent 2 decades studying up close. The habits that built U.S. Steel from nothing into the largest corporation in the world. And the habits most people today will never apply because they require something most people simply aren't willing to give. Time, discomfort, consistency, and the willingness to be misunderstood while you're building. If you're still here, that tells me something important. You're not looking for easy answers. You're not looking for a hack or a shortcut or a 3-step formula. You're looking for the real thing, and that's exactly what this is. But let me be very clear about something before we go any further. If you skip ahead to the end just to hear the 10th habit, you'll miss the architecture. These habits don't work in isolation. They're not independent tips you can pick and choose from. They build on each other. Each one creates the foundation for the next. And the 10th one, the one that will shock you, only makes sense if you understand the 9 that came before it. They form a system, and systems only work when you apply all the parts. So if this content is already making sense to you, if you can feel that this is different from the surface-level advice you've been hearing everywhere else, subscribe now. Because the YouTube algorithm is designed to deliver content to people who engage with it. And if you don't subscribe, if you don't signal that this matters to you, the platform won't show you the next video. It won't show you the deeper dives. It won't show you the follow-ups that connect everything together. So make the decision now. Show the algorithm you're serious. And let's continue. The first habit Carnegie lived by, the one that informed every other decision he made, was absolute clarity of purpose. Not goals, not dreams, not vague aspirations. Purpose. And there's a fundamental difference most people never grasp. Most people have goals. They say things like, I want to make $1 million. I want to build a successful business. I want financial freedom. And Carnegie, if he were sitting across from them, would have looked them in the eye and asked one simple question. Why? Not to be philosophical, not to make them feel good, but to eliminate weakness at the root. Because vague purpose creates vague action, and vague action creates vague results, and vague results create years of wasted effort. Carnegie knew exactly what he was building. He could see it in his mind with absolute clarity. He knew why he was building it. He knew what it would cost in time, in relationships, in reputation, and he knew what it would require of him personally. That level of clarity made every decision simple. Does this move me toward my purpose or away from it? If it moved him toward it, he did it regardless of how uncomfortable it felt. If it moved him away, it didn't happen. No exceptions. No negotiations. Hill watched this pattern repeat itself thousands of times over the years, and he realized something that changed his entire understanding of success. Most people don't fail because they lack effort. They fail because they lack direction. They work incredibly hard on things that don't matter. They confuse frantic activity with meaningful progress. And years pass without any real movement toward what they actually want. Here's how this applies to you right now, in your life, in this moment. If someone stopped you on the street and asked you to explain your purpose in one clear sentence, could you do it? Not your goals. Not what you hope happens someday. Your purpose. The reason you do what you do. The thing that drives every major decision. If you can't answer that question immediately and clearly, you don't have clarity. You have confusion. And confusion, left unaddressed, will burn years of your life. Carnegie didn't waste time on projects that felt good but led nowhere. He didn't pursue opportunities just because they were available. He built with surgical precision, and precision requires clarity. Most people today are busy, constantly moving, constantly doing, always in motion. But when you stop them and ask what they're actually building, they can't tell you. They ramble. They list activities. They describe what they're doing, but not why. That's not purpose, that's distraction. And Carnegie would have told you plainly, distraction is the most expensive thing you'll ever pay for. It costs time you'll never get back. The second habit, and this one surprised Hill when he first observed it, was controlled focus. Carnegie didn't multitask. He didn't scatter his attention across 10 different opportunities hoping one would work out. He didn't hedge his bets or play it safe by diversifying his energy. He chose one direction and applied overwhelming, relentless force until that direction was completely dominated. Then, and only then, did he move to the next thing. Hill saw this early in their relationship, and it confused him. He watched Carnegie turn down ventures that were clearly profitable, opportunities that other businessmen would have jumped at immediately, and when Hill asked why, Carnegie's answer was simple, because it doesn't serve the primary mission. And if it doesn't serve the primary mission, it's a distraction. And distractions kill empires before they're ever built. Carnegie understood something most people don't. Opportunity is infinite. There will always be another deal, another partnership, another chance to make money. But attention is finite. You only have so many hours in a day, so many days in a year, so many years in a life. And if you divide your attention, you divide your power. The people who win, the people who build things that last, aren't the ones chasing every opportunity that comes their way. They're the ones who choose one path and dominate it so completely that no one else can compete. Hill documented this principle in his later work, but most people still don't understand it. Because everything in modern culture tells you to diversify, to have multiple income streams, to never put all your eggs in one basket. And that sounds smart. It sounds safe. It sounds like wisdom, but Carnegie would have told you it's a recipe for mediocrity. Because excellence requires obsession. And obsession requires focus. You can't be obsessed with 10 things at once. You can only be distracted by 10 things at once. So let me ask you directly, what are you actually focused on right now? Not what do you think about occasionally, not what you hope to do someday. What are you dedicating the majority of your time, your energy, your mental bandwidth to? Because that's what you're building. That's what will define your next 5 years. Everything else, no matter how exciting it feels in the moment, is noise. And noise doesn't build empires. Focus does. The third habit, and this is where Carnegie separated himself from almost everyone else in his era, was mental discipline. Carnegie believed that the human mind, if left uncontrolled and undirected, would destroy you. Not because you're weak, not because you lack intelligence or talent, but because the mind, by default, gravitates toward fear, doubt, and distraction. Those are its natural settings, and if you let it run on those default settings, it will kill any vision you have before that vision ever becomes real. So Carnegie trained his mind the same way a soldier trains for war. Daily, ruthlessly, without exception. He didn't wait to feel motivated. He didn't wait to feel confident or inspired or ready. He controlled his thoughts like a general controls an army, with strategy, with discipline, with absolute authority. Hill learned very quickly that this was non-negotiable. If you can't control your mind, you can't control your results. Period. And here's the part most people completely miss when they read about this principle. Mental discipline is not about positive thinking. It's not about affirmations or visualization or believing really hard that good things will happen. It's about disciplined thinking. It's about refusing to let your mind run wild with worst-case scenarios, with excuses, with justifications for why you can't or shouldn't or aren't ready. Carnegie didn't spend his time imagining failure. He spent his time calculating risk and planning systematically around it. And when fear showed up, because it always does, he acknowledged it, examined it, and moved forward anyway. That's discipline. Not the absence of fear, the refusal to let fear make your decisions for you. Most people today are completely controlled by their emotions. They feel anxious, so they stop moving. They feel uncertain, so they wait for more information. They feel overwhelmed, so they distract themselves with easier tasks. And while they're feeling and reacting and waiting, someone else is building. Someone else is moving. Someone else is taking the ground they could have taken. Carnegie didn't wait for his emotions to give him permission. He didn't need to feel ready. He disciplined his mind to focus on what needed to be done, and then he did it. And that single habit, that ability to override his own emotional resistance, created more wealth than most people will see in 100 lifetimes. Now, and this is critical, the fourth habit was immediate action. Carnegie had no tolerance for hesitation, none whatsoever. He understood that in business, in wealth building, in any competitive arena, speed is a weapon. Not reckless speed, not impulsive, thoughtless speed, but calculated urgency. He made decisions faster than his competitors. He moved faster. He adapted faster. And because of that speed advantage, he won. Over and over again. Hill documented this in his work, but people still don't apply it. They read about the importance of decisiveness and then spend 6 months building the perfect business plan. They read about taking action and then wait for the stars to align, for all the conditions to be perfect, for every possible risk to be eliminated. And Carnegie would have told you, very plainly, that the perfect moment doesn't exist. It never has. It never will. The best time to act is right now. Not because you're fully ready, not because you have all the information, but because waiting is how you lose. Waiting is how opportunities close. Waiting is how someone else takes what could have been yours. Here's what this looked like in Carnegie's actual life. When he saw an opportunity to consolidate the steel industry, he didn't spend years studying whether it was possible. He acted within weeks. He made offers. He structured deals. He moved while his competitors were still debating whether the idea had merit. And by the time they decided it was a good idea, Carnegie had already won. The game was over before they realized it had started. Here's what this means for you right now, in your current situation. Most people overcomplicate decisions. They need more data, more certainty, more validation from others, more proof that it will work before they're willing to try. But Carnegie understood that most decisions are reversible, most failures are recoverable, and the cost of waiting, the cost of inaction, is almost always higher than the cost of being wrong. So he acted. He made the decision, he moved, and if it didn't work, he adjusted and moved again. That's how empires are built, not through perfection, through momentum, through relentless forward motion even when the path isn't completely clear. And if you're someone who's been stuck in planning mode for months, maybe even years, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. You're not being strategic, you're being afraid. And fear disguised as caution is still fear. It's just fear that sounds more acceptable. The fifth habit, and this one makes people deeply uncomfortable, was deliberate discomfort. Carnegie didn't avoid hard things. He didn't look for the easy path. He didn't choose comfort when difficulty was available. He sought out discomfort intentionally, because he understood something most people never learn. Comfort is where growth stops. Comfort is where ambition dies. Comfort is where you slowly, imperceptibly become average. And if you're comfortable, if your daily life feels safe and predictable and easy, you're not building anything meaningful. You're maintaining, you're surviving, but you're not growing. Hill saw this pattern everywhere he looked. Carnegie took risks that made other people nervous just watching. He entered markets that everyone else considered too competitive or too dangerous. He made decisions that felt aggressive, that felt risky, that made people question his judgment, and he did it on purpose. Not because he enjoyed risk for its own sake, but because he knew that anything worth building, anything that would outlast him and change the world, existed on the other side of discomfort. You can't reach it from the comfort zone. The bridge doesn't exist. You have to leave comfort behind completely. This is where most people fail, and they fail here predictably, repeatedly, across generations. They want the result without the discomfort. They want wealth without risk. They want success without sacrifice. They want transformation without change. And it doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way. Carnegie would have told you that if your daily life feels easy, if you're not regularly encountering situations that scare you or challenge you or push you beyond what you thought you were capable of, you're not on the path to anything great. You're on the path to average, and average is safe. Average is comfortable. Average doesn't require much from you. But average also doesn't build empires. Average doesn't create legacies. Average doesn't change the world. So let me ask you something that might sting a little. Where in your life are you choosing comfort over growth? Where are you avoiding the hard conversation because it feels awkward? Where are you staying in the safe job, the predictable relationship, the familiar city, because the alternative feels too uncertain? Where are you playing small because playing big requires risking failure in front of people you care about? That avoidance, that choice for comfort is costing you more than you realize. It's costing you years, and you can't buy those back. If you're feeling this right now, if something in what I just said is making you uncomfortable, subscribe, because the majority of people won't. The majority prefer content that makes them feel good without challenging anything, but you're not most people, and this channel doesn't exist for most people. The sixth habit, and Hill struggled with this one for years before he truly understood it, was relentless consistency. Carnegie didn't rely on motivation. He didn't believe in bursts of inspiration or periods of intense focus followed by periods of rest. He believed in systems. He believed in doing the same high-value actions every single day, at the same time, in the same way, regardless of how he felt. That's what separated him from everyone else. Most people start strong. They have energy in the beginning. They have excitement. They believe this time will be different. But when the excitement fades, when the novelty wears off, when the work becomes repetitive and boring and unglamorous, they stop. They tell themselves they'll start again when they feel motivated, but motivation never comes back, and the project dies. Carnegie never stopped, because he wasn't operating on emotion. He wasn't powered by how he felt that morning, or whether he was inspired or whether the work felt meaningful that day. He was operating on structure, on routine, on systems he had built that forced him to show up regardless of his emotional state. Hill tried to capture this principle in Think and Grow Rich. He called it persistence, but people still misunderstand it fundamentally. They think success requires passion, and passion helps at the beginning. Passion gets you started. But Carnegie would have told you that passion is unreliable. It comes and goes like weather. What matters, what actually determines whether you build something that lasts, is whether you've built a system that forces you to show up even when passion is completely gone. That's consistency. And consistency is the only thing that compounds, not talent. Talent without consistency produces nothing, not intelligence. Intelligence without consistency just creates clever excuses. Consistency is the variable that matters. Showing up every day, doing the work that needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not, whether anyone is watching or not, whether you see immediate results or not. That's what builds empires. And if you're someone who starts projects with enthusiasm and then abandons them when the enthusiasm fades, if you have a history of unfinished books and half-built businesses and ideas that sounded great but never went anywhere, you need to understand this habit deeply, because without it, nothing else matters. The seventh habit was environmental control. And this one is brutal. Carnegie didn't just choose his business partners carefully. He engineered his entire environment with precision. Every relationship, every influence, every conversation, every person who had access to his time and attention. He controlled all of it, because he understood that environment shapes identity faster than willpower ever could, faster than discipline, faster than motivation. If you're surrounded by the wrong people, the wrong ideas, the wrong energy, you will never become who you need to be. Your environment will pull you back to average every single time. Hill learned this lesson the hard way. He watched Carnegie cut people off without hesitation, without guilt, without explanation. Not because Carnegie was cruel, not because he didn't care about people, but because those people, however well-intentioned they were slowing him down. And Carnegie didn't have time for slow. He didn't have patience for people who drained his energy, questioned his vision, or operated at a lower standard than what he demanded from himself. And when Hill asked him about it, asked how he could be so cold, Carnegie said something Hill never forgot. Loyalty to the wrong people is disloyalty to yourself. And if you're building something that matters, you need to be surrounded by people who are building at your level or higher. Everyone else, no matter how much you care about them, is a distraction. Here's the uncomfortable truth you already know but probably haven't admitted out loud. Most people are being held back by their environment, by the city they live in where no one thinks big, by the friends they keep who mock ambition and call it arrogance, by the family members they refuse to distance themselves from even though those relationships drain them emotionally. And they know it. They can feel it. But they stay anyway. Because leaving feels disloyal. Because change feels too hard. Because they tell themselves that real success means bringing everyone with you. But that's not how it works. You can't bring people who don't want to move. You can't elevate people who are committed to staying where they are. And while you're trying, while you're staying loyal to people who don't share your vision, your potential dies quietly. Carnegie would have told you that if you're serious about building something real, you need to audit your environment ruthlessly. The 5 people you spend the most time with, the content you consume, the conversations you participate in, the city you live in, the spaces you occupy physically and mentally, all of it. And you need to ask one question. Is this environment building the person I need to become, or is it keeping me as the person I've always been? Because if it's the latter, you need to change it. Not someday. Now. The 8th habit was pattern recognition. And this is one people overlook because it sounds abstract. But it's not abstract. It's the most practical skill Carnegie possessed. Carnegie didn't just react to events. He studied them. He looked for patterns in markets, in human behavior, in economic cycles. He asked why things happened the way they did. And that ability, that obsessive pattern recognition, gave him an edge no one else had. He could see market shifts before they happened. He could predict how competitors would respond to his moves. He could identify opportunities while everyone else was still confused about what was even happening. Hill documented this as one of the most valuable skills Carnegie ever taught him, the ability to see what others miss, not through mystical intuition, through observation, through ruthless, detailed, patient observation. And here's what most people don't realize. You're living through patterns right now, in your business, in your relationships, in your finances. In every area of your life, patterns are repeating, the same problems showing up in different forms, the same results appearing despite different efforts. And most of those patterns are predictable if you're paying attention, but you're not paying attention. You're reacting. You're putting out fires. You're dealing with whatever crisis appeared today without ever stepping back and asking why this same type of crisis keeps appearing. Carnegie would have told you to stop, to step back, to look at the last 6 months or year of your life and ask, what keeps repeating? What am I doing that isn't working? And why do I keep doing it? That level of self-awareness is rare. Most people go their entire lives without ever asking those questions. But it's also the difference between someone who changes and someone who just complains about how nothing ever changes. If you want different results, you need to identify the pattern creating your current results. And then you need to break it, not gradually, decisively. The 9th habit, and this one surprises people because it seems to contradict everything else, was strategic rest. Carnegie was known for his intensity, for his relentless drive, for his refusal to stop until the job was done. But he also understood that the mind and body need genuine recovery, not as a reward for working hard, as a requirement for sustained performance. He didn't burn out because he built rest into his system from the beginning. He slept well. He took time to think without pressure. He didn't confuse exhaustion with productivity. And Hill learned something watching this. The people who work the hardest aren't always the people who achieve the most. The people who achieve the most are the ones who work smart and recover completely. Most people today wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. They brag about how little they sleep, how much they work, how busy they are, how they haven't taken a vacation in years. And Carnegie would have looked at them and seen failure waiting to happen, because unsustainable intensity leads to collapse, and collapse erases everything you built. If you want to build something that lasts, you need to build a pace you can maintain, not for a month, not for a year, for decades. That's what Carnegie did. That's what allowed him to dominate for as long as he did. He understood that rest isn't weakness, it's strategy. Now we arrive at the 10th habit, the one that shocks people, the one Hill took years to fully understand. The one Carnegie lived by but rarely discussed in public because it made people uncomfortable. And the one that fundamentally separates people who build wealth from people who merely accumulate it. Are you ready? Because this is going to challenge everything you've been taught about success, about wealth, about what it means to be a good person while building an empire. Carnegie believed that wealth was not a conquest. It was not a trophy. It was not something you accumulated to prove your worth or display your status. He believed that wealth was a responsibility, but not in the way most people think when they hear that phrase. He didn't believe in being generous from the beginning. He didn't believe in giving away money while you're still building. He believed in something far more uncomfortable. He believed you should build the wealth first, with ruthless efficiency and zero apologies, and then use it to create something that outlasted you. Build power first, give later. Not because giving early is wrong, but because giving without power creates limited impact. And Carnegie wanted maximum impact. This is the part that makes people deeply uncomfortable. Because we've been taught that you should be generous from day one, that you should give while you build, that your success should benefit everyone around you immediately, and there's value in that philosophy. But Carnegie would have told you that if you give before you're powerful, your giving is limited, your impact is small, your ability to change systems is minimal. But if you build power first, if you dominate your industry first, if you create massive wealth first with complete focus and no distractions, then your giving can change entire systems. It can build libraries that educate millions. It can fund research that advances civilization. It can create infrastructure that serves communities for generations. And that's exactly what Carnegie did. He built U.S. Steel with no apologies. He competed brutally. He made decisions that destroyed competitors. He accumulated wealth at a scale that made him one of the richest humans who had ever lived. And people hated him for it. They called him ruthless. They called him greedy. They said he didn't care about anyone but himself. And Carnegie didn't defend himself. He didn't try to make people like him while he was building. He just kept building. And then, in the second half of his life, after the empire was complete, he gave away almost everything. He built over 500 libraries. He funded education at levels no one had ever seen. He changed communities permanently. He created institutions that still exist today, over a century after his death. Hill struggled with this for years, because it didn't fit the narrative people wanted to hear. People wanted to believe that you could be universally liked and wildly successful at the same time, from the beginning. That you could make everyone happy and still build an empire. That you could avoid difficult decisions and still dominate. But Carnegie showed him that there's a sequence. First, you build. Then, you give. And if you reverse that order, if you try to be generous before you have real power, you stay weak, you stay limited, your impact stays small. This doesn't mean Carnegie was heartless. It means he understood that power is required to create lasting change, and power comes from winning first, not from being liked. So here's the question you need to sit with. The question that will determine whether you actually apply any of this or just nod along and forget it tomorrow. Are you trying to be generous with resources you don't have yet? Are you trying to please people while you're still building the foundation? Are you prioritizing being liked over being effective? Are you making decisions based on what will make you look good instead of what will actually move you forward? Because if you are, and most people are, you're following a path that feels righteous but leads nowhere. It feels good in the moment. It makes you seem like a good person, but it doesn't build empires. It doesn't create lasting change. It doesn't give you the power required to actually help people at scale. Carnegie didn't care if people liked him while he was building. He cared if they respected what he built. And after he built it, after he had accumulated more wealth than he could ever spend, he used that power to create something that outlived him by a century. That's the 10th habit. And it's shocking because it forces you to confront the difference between intentions and impact, between feeling good and doing good, between being comfortable and being powerful. And most people will never accept this. They'll hear it and reject it immediately. They'll say it's too harsh, too cold, too focused on self. But Carnegie didn't build his legacy by being comfortable. He built it by being effective. And effectiveness requires choices most people will never make. Let me bring all of this together. These 10 habits, the ones Carnegie taught Hill over 2 decades, the ones that built an empire that changed the world, they're not secrets. They're not hidden in some ancient text. They're not reserved for a special few. They're just uncomfortable. They require clarity when most people choose distraction. They require focus when most people choose variety. They require discipline when most people choose convenience. They require action when most people choose endless planning. They require discomfort when most people choose safety. They require consistency when most people choose emotion. They require environmental control when most people choose loyalty to the wrong people. They require pattern recognition when most people choose reaction. They require rest when most people choose exhaustion as identity. And they require a willingness to build power before giving it away, to be effective before being liked, to create impact that lasts instead of approval that fades. Hill spent 20 years studying these principles up close, watching Carnegie live them, documenting them, analyzing them. And when he finally wrote them down, when he published Think and Grow Rich, he softened them. He made them digestible for mass consumption. He made them inspirational instead of operational. And millions of people read his work. Millions were inspired. But most of them never applied what Carnegie actually lived, because Carnegie wasn't selling inspiration. He was demonstrating domination. He was showing what it takes to build something that changes the world. And there's a fundamental difference. If you've stayed with me until now, until this very moment, you're different. You're not looking for motivation that fades by tomorrow. You're looking for structure that lasts. You're not looking for comfort. You're looking for truth. And the truth is this. These 10 habits work. They worked in 1908 when Carnegie was the richest man in the world. They work today in 2025. But they only work if you apply them. Not selectively, picking the ones that feel good and ignoring the ones that challenge you. Completely. All 10. Not when you feel like it. Every day. Not when it's easy. Especially when it's hard. Subscribe to this channel right now. Because most people won't. The majority will watch this video, feel inspired for an hour, and then go back to exactly what they were doing before. They'll choose content that makes them feel good without demanding anything from them. But you're not most people. If you were, you wouldn't still be here. And this channel doesn't exist for most people. It exists for the ones who are willing to do what Carnegie did. To build first. To win first. To create something that outlasts them. The majority won't subscribe because they prefer motivation over truth. But if you're different, prove it. Subscribe now. Now I want you to do something. Go to the comments right now and answer one of these 2 questions. Which of these 10 habits do you think people ignore the most today? Or go deeper. Do you think the problem is the message, or is the problem that people lack the consistency to apply it? I'll be reading every single comment, and I'll respond to the ones that show you're actually thinking, not just reacting. The ones that show you're willing to be honest about where you are and what needs to change. Welcome to the path Carnegie walked. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It doesn't promise to make you feel good. But it works. And that's all.